Hi everyone, this is Brian from HobbyQuest, and today I'll be showing you how to build the Twinsky. Now, the Twinsky is a wooden hand glider, and all you'll need for this project is some sandpaper, a wooden sanding block, and some super glue, and accelerator. Alright, so to start, everybody should be getting one of these packets, and inside there are going to be a lot of parts. So let your students know that they should try to keep as organized as possible so they don't drop any of the parts or mix them up with someone else's. To open this, you just have to open it from the bottom, or if you have scissors, you can just clip it and open it that way. I think that's what I'm going to do, in fact. Alright, so inside there are going to be a bunch of parts. Make sure your students know what they have so that they don't lose them. Alright, there should be 2 sets of wings, an elevator, a rudder, some connector pieces, and a fuselage. Now this next part is going to be up to your discretion. If you have an older group, you can go ahead and use the sandpaper and sanding block. But if you have a younger group that may have a bit of trouble with the sandpaper, I recommend skipping the sandpaper and just allowing them to decorate their plane with markers. Okay, you can go ahead and let them decorate the fuselage. I would use your discretion to decide whether or not they can decorate their wings, because these are pretty fragile. They are made of balsa wood, so you don't want your students to accidentally break them while they're coloring them. Alright, so if you have an older group, you can give them the sandpaper and sanding block and tell them what they want to do is that they'll want to take the sanding block and the sandpaper and put it together like this, and then very carefully, very gently sand away the edges of their model. Alright? Because we want to try to make a more aerodynamic shape, and to do that we want to curve off all the edges. And just give them some time to start sanding it down. They don't have to do too much sanding, just enough to curve the edges off. You don't want to end up wearing away the entire model. So just nice and gently and carefully sand away the edges. Try to have them avoid sanding the tail part in the back of the fuselage, because that's actually where the rudder will fit into place, and if they sand that away, there's not going to be any spot for them to put the rudder anymore. So you want to have them do it on the top part of the fuselage and the bottom as best as they can. And when it's nice and smooth and ready, they can move on to the wings. Now, for the wings of the Twinsky, we can once again sand off the edges a little bit, just to make it a little more aerodynamic. We want to just round off the top of our wing. So just go ahead and place your wing at the very edge of a table, and just very, very gently and carefully sand away the edge of the wing so that it smooths it out a bit. They should try to make sure to be as close to the table as possible, but not so close that they end up damaging the table. So once that's done, you can move on to the next wing and do the same thing. and also the elevator as well. All right. Once this is done, we can start assembling our model. Now you're going to notice there are two different wings. One has this indentation on the back and one doesn't. We're going to take the one with the indentation, and we're actually going to be putting that one on top. Okay, so the other wing that doesn't have one is going to be our bottom wing. Now the bottom wing is what it's going to fit into the slot of the biplane, like so. And the students are going to try to center it as best as they can. Once that's in place, they can take this connector piece and they're going to slide the connector piece in place. So you'll notice that there are these hooks on the connector pieces. They just have to slide it in a little bit. It doesn't have to go in too far. Just slide it on like that. And do the same for the other side. Now, if you look at my example, you'll notice that it's actually the connector piece is oriented a certain way. We want it to kind of slant forward toward the nose of the plane. So make sure that the students know that it should be tilted, kind of like a leaning tower. Just lean a little bit toward the nose of the plane. Once those two are in place, we can slide in very carefully the top wing of our biplane, the Twinsky. And to do this, you just have to slide it in from one end until you get past the other one. And slide that in too. All right. And then once this is in place, you can push in the connector pieces a little bit more just to make sure it stays on. Just like that. Okay, so students should have something that looks like this. All right, and your elevator, once that's ready, once you've sanded it a bit, you can slide the elevator in place, which goes on like this, like so. And then take your rudder, and that rudder will slide into place above the elevator. There should be a slot just for that. Okay. And this is the Twinsky. Now, it might be a good idea to secure all the pieces a bit so that they don't fall off while it's flying. Especially the rudder, that can fall off sometimes pretty easily. So you're going to take some super glue, and we can actually just super glue the rudder in place by putting a drop of super glue. Just a drop, and just give it a spray, and that should hold the rudder in place. You can do the same thing for the elevator, just put a drop to hold it in place. And that should be enough to make it stay. Now, for the wings of the biplane, you don't have to use super glue on that. You can actually slide the wing up and down a little bit, and that's actually going to affect the flight when you launch the plane. All right, so if you slide it up all the way in the front, it's going to actually change the way it flies. It might be a little bit more nose heavy. Okay, so that's a good spot to allow for some variation for your students when they're flying. If of course the wings are too loose, maybe the gap between maybe the gap over here is a little too wide, you're going to want to make sure that the wings stay in place. So then in that case, if it's too loose, you can take your super glue and just put a drop on the underside, maybe a few more drops just to make sure it stays. Give it a spray, and that will hold the wing in place so it doesn't move around in the case that the wings are really loose. Okay. Now, this is the Twinsky. When you're flying this plane, just make sure that there's a nice amount of space for your students to toss it in, and it's just a hand glider, so all they have to do is toss it to launch. Okay, so I hope this was informative and fun for you, and I hope you and your students have a great quest.